This calming, long-form science bedtime story gently guides the listener through the life of an iceberg, from its quiet birth in ancient snowfields to its return to the sea as freshwater. Along the way, we explore memory, pressure, phase transitions, the nature of salt, the silence of cold, and the slow poetry of melting. This isn't just about ice. It's about how nature remembers, how your body holds water older than time, and how even the coldest things know how to let go. You begin in a place the sun only grazes, a place so far from urgency it has forgotten. The difference between days and decades. This is not the kind of snow you've seen outside your window, not the kind that melts by noon or squeaks beneath boots. This snow stays. It falls in silence. And the silence stays too. You're somewhere near the top of the world, or the bottom. It doesn't matter which. The cold doesn't mind direction. The air here is thin, like breath half remembered. But the snow remembers everything. Every flake is a tiny six-pointed memory. And once it lands, it does not leave. Here, time does not sweep snow away. It layers it, softly, gently, relentlessly. Each snowfall tucks the one before it into stillness, and the one before that, and the one before that. You can imagine it like a blanket folded again and again over a bed that no one sleeps in, but something rests there just the same. This is where icebergs are born, not in dramatic cracks or cinematic splashes, but in quiet repetition. A flake falls, and another, and another. And somewhere inside all of this white, something begins to press, not just downward, but inward. Years pass, then centuries, then millennia. You can almost hear the weight. You can feel it in your chest, a deep, slow settling. Each layer squeezes the one beneath it. Snow becomes denser. Flakes begin to forget their edges. There's no heat, but there is pressure. And pressure, over time, is its own kind of fire. Was once soft begins to harden. The snow becomes firm. A halfway thing. It's no longer just snow, but not yet ice. It's like a dream on the edge of waking. The air once trapped between snowflakes gets pressed out or sealed in tiny bubbles, frozen sighs of ancient skies. And slowly, this sleeping snowfall becomes something more. It becomes glacial. Ice. Not just cold, but clear. Not just still, but ancient. And though it doesn't move yet, it holds the memory of motion. You might be surprised to know how blue it becomes. Not white. Not really. Not deep inside. Because when the ice has waited long enough, when it has been pressed without complaint for thousands of years, it loses even its whiteness. Only the deepest blues remain. Blue, because all the other colors have been swallowed. Blue, like silence made visible. Blue, like the last color you see in a dream before waking. If you were to stand above this place, above the thousands of years of fallen snow, you wouldn't feel its age. You'd just see stillness, smoothness, a calm so vast it feels holy. And underneath that stillness, layers of breath, layers of sky. The snowflakes that fell before pyramids were built, the ones that fell before languages had names, the ones that fell before you ever wondered where water goes. They're all here, sleeping, becoming. You might wonder, what makes snow stay? Why doesn't it melt? And the answer lies in the quiet rebellion of cold, in the refusal of warmth to arrive, in the way sunlight bends away from these poles, never long enough to bring release. Snow stays when days are short and skies are tired, when clouds forget how to cry and simply dust the earth in frost. It stays when the wind says nothing new, when storms do not crash but whisper, and most of all, snow stays when no one is watching. There's something sacred in that. The becoming that happens unseen. The way transformation doesn't ask for applause. You were once a child who may have tried to catch snowflakes on your tongue. Each one melted before you could understand it. But here, in this ancient polar silence, they never melt, Dot. They gather, Dot, and what gathers begins to press. And what presses begins to change. Eventually, it becomes so heavy that gravity takes notice, Dot. It begins to sigh, to shift, to settle more deeply into the bones of the earth. This is the prelude to a glacier. The inhale before the exhale. The stillness before the slowest kind of motion. And you are floating above it all. Your breath condenses in the cold. But the ice does not. It remains unmoved even as it becomes. You are standing on a memory that hasn't spoken in 10,000 years. And it will not speak tonight either, but it will hold you. You can imagine placing your hand against the glacier's side. It doesn't feel cold like a refrigerator. It feels old, like a cathedral made of water, like something that remembers the stars when they were closer to the ground. And yet, for all its silence, this is not death. This is preparation. Beneath you, the weight grows. The pressure increases. Molecules shift. Crystals fuse. The glacier begins its long dreaming journey. But not yet. Not quite. Tonight it rests. And you, too, are allowed to rest. Let the snow cover your thoughts. Let the layers press gently against the noise. Let everything melt away, except stillness. Because before anything moves, before any iceberg drifts, before any melting, before any voyage, there must be a pause, a great glacial pause, the kind you are in now, the kind of stillness that does not sleep, but waits. And beneath this stillness, something is becoming. You don't have to know what it is yet. You just have to know. It's beginning right here, right under you. You are still standing where the world hardly moves, where silence sits not just around you, but within you. The air is dry. The wind, soft like breath held in the lungs too long. And below your feet, something is changing. You can't feel it at first, because slow things don't announce themselves. They arrive inside silence and stay there. But listen closely. There is movement, not quick, not sharp. It is the weight of time pressing down on snow. Each flake that falls adds the smallest whisper. But together, they become a hush so deep. It starts to sink. Layer by layer, the snow compresses the memory beneath it. Not violently. Just inevitably. Imagine placing a single feather on a pillow. It barely stirs. Now imagine adding a feather every day. For 10,000 years, what was once soft and airy becomes solid. Not because of one act, but because of countless quiet repetitions. That's what cold does. It gives things time to settle, to become themselves. And in the cold, even air starts to retreat. Between the flakes, tiny pockets of breath once lived. But now, with each winter stacked on the last, those pockets shrink. The snow compacts. It hardens. It forgets how to be light. And what it becomes is heavier than you might expect. You might think of cold as emptiness, a lack of heat, a loss. But here, cold is fullness. It's the invitation to slow down, to concentrate. As temperature drops, motion stills. The molecules move less. They press closer. They huddle like strangers in a storm, finding comfort in proximity. In the warmth, things expand. But in the cold, they gather inward. Densities shift. Solids form. What was once cloud becomes crystal. What was once vapor becomes snow. And what was once snow becomes ice so heavy, it forgets how to float. This is the weight of stillness, the gravity of patience. And the deeper the snow lies, the more it loses itself to pressure. There's a word for the in-between. Fern. Old snow, not yet ice. It crackles faintly when stepped on. Grainy, dense, waiting to be reborn. Fern holds both memory and potential, like a diary that hasn't been written in years, but still knows your handwriting, and as more snow presses from. Above, the fern transforms. It lets go of its lightness. It lets go of air. Ice forms not in rebellion, but in quiet surrender. Not all at once, but slowly, molecule by molecule, bond by bond, the crystal structures align. They lock into place, like dancers caught mid-step, frozen not by fear, but by time. The transformation is invisible on the surface. You'd never notice it looking down, but beneath, the weight grows. And with weight comes movement. Glaciers don't crash into being. They settle. They settle so deeply, they begin to slip. Not forward. Not yet. Downward. Gravity, once ignored, begins to whisper its name. It's not the sharp pull of a fall, but the long tug of belonging. The glacier starts to sink, slowly sliding over bedrock, as if trying to remember where it came from. This is how cold makes things heavy. By letting M become dense with time. By giving space for stillness to harden. By making patience into pressure. You may have felt it yourself. On nights when your thoughts grow too quiet, when silence becomes weight, when your chest feels full of something you can't name, but you know is real. That's how ice forms too, from unnamed things, from what gathers slowly in the dark. And with weight comes force. And with force comes shape. The ground beneath begins to notice. The land feels the shift. It creaks, but it does not protest. Instead, it allows the glacier to reshape it, to smooth its ridges, to carve valleys, to etch silence into stone. And all of this from cold, from stillness, from the absence of motion that eventually becomes movement itself. You might wonder, how much weight does it take to make a glacier move? The answer is not just in pounds or tons or pressure gauges. It's in time, because time, when allowed to settle, carries more mass than anything else. 1,000,000 snowflakes, fallen over centuries, become a force so steady it can shift mountains. You carry some of that weight too. The pressure of years in your shoulders, the gravity of memory in your spine. But like the glacier, you don't move in panic. You move in presence. You become heavy with knowing. And that knowing moves you. The glacier does not rush. It does not ask permission. It just goes. And the colder it gets, the more tightly its crystals bond, the stronger it becomes. Not brittle, but united. That's the strange secret of cold. It doesn't weaken. It deepens. It binds atoms together until they sing the same song, until their motion becomes harmony. So when you think of heaviness, think of stillness. Think of gathering. Think of snow pressed into song. You can lie down now and feel the pressure of the ground, not as a burden, but as a kind of embrace. Because beneath you, beneath all this cold and quiet, a breath is forming, not in lungs, but in ice. The glacier prepares to move, not because it must, but because it can. And when it moves, it carries not just its own weight, but the memory of everything that pressed it into being. And so, without warning, without sound, the land begins to lean. The ice takes its first long sigh, a slow downward breath that will become the journey of a lifetime. But for now, it remains still, just heavy enough to begin listening to the pull of the sea. You are still in the cold. But now, something deeper begins to stir. Not in the wind, but in the water. Because eventually, snow becomes more than silence. It becomes part of something larger. And that something must decide what to hold, what to let go. You see, not everything freezes the same way. Not everything wants to be still. Not everything belongs inside the cold. Salt, for example, does not freeze with grace. It resists. It refuses to sit still. When water turns to ice, salt is pushed away. Like someone asked to leave because they couldn't stop fidgeting at the dinner table. It's not personal. It's just physics. You might think all things in water would freeze together, that when water turns solid, everything inside it comes along. But no. Ice is particular. It's choosy, discerning. It wants only water, only the purest version of it. The salt is left behind, not out of cruelty, but because the shape of ice has no room for it. Water molecules lock arms in a perfect crystalline lattice, six-pointed, symmetrical, serene. Salt, with its jagged edges and chaotic charge, doesn't fit. It would disturb the symmetry. It would ruin the stillness. So the ice forms around it. And the salt is cast aside, pushed into tiny pockets of brine that don't freeze at all. Like tears that haven't been cried yet. Like memories that won't settle. And slowly, as more water turns to ice, those salty pockets grow more concentrated. They become dense, sharp, unwelcome. This is why sea ice tastes different than freshwater ice. Because it is constantly trying to forget something it was once forced to carry. But glacier ice, the kind that forms from snow, not ocean, never knew the sea. It froze in quiet places, far from salt. And so it freezes clean. And this, perhaps, is why icebergs float differently. Why they shine with a deeper kind of blue. Why their edges are soft, but their presence is immense. Because there is no bitterness in them, only pressure, only time, only water that let go of everything that didn't belong. You might wonder, what is salt really? Not just seasoning, not just something sprinkled on food. Salt is a mineral made of opposites. Sodium, eager to give away its electrons. Chloride, desperate to take them in. They bind together in perfect tension. In hunger and satisfaction, all at once. But in ice, there is no space for that kind of drama. There is only calm. And calm can't hold contradiction. So when freezing begins, the salt is left suspended, hovering in liquid veins that resist solidification. And this, too, has a name, brine, a slushy mix of water too salty to freeze, trapped between crystals, but never truly welcome. Eventually, even that brine can disappear, draining downward through channels in the ice, seeping out like thoughts that don't belong in the dream. The ice, now older, more settled, more sure of itself, carries no salt. It is light, not because it lacks weight, but because it has released what it could not carry. And what a lesson that is. That to become clear, you must let the noisy things fall away. That to freeze beautifully, you must decide what cannot come with you. You've done this before, haven't you? Let go of what didn't fit? Walked away from a conversation that kept repeating itself? You didn't need to explain. You just needed to crystallize. Like the ice. Like the snowflake that says, "This is my shape." And that shape does not have room for salt. And still, salt does not disappear. It lingers in the water left behind. It gathers in the spaces where ice refuses to grow. It becomes sharp, intense, even dangerous. In the ocean, where sea ice forms and reforms, the brine can carve channels through the pack. It can sink colder and heavier than the water around it, plunging downward into the depths. This process has a name too, brine rejection. A phrase that sounds almost emotional, but it is simply a matter of shape, of fit. The ice wants harmony, salt wants motion. So they part, and in that parting, a story begins. Because as the salt sinks, it pulls surface water with it. It drives circulation. It stirs the ocean's great conveyor belt. All because ice said, no. A single act of refusal can change the flow of the sea. And that is the quiet power of freezing, of choosing form over confusion, stillness over clutter, clarity over contradiction. So the glacier, formed from snowfall, pressed by years, remains clean, free of salt, free of chaos. Just water, remembering itself. It's strange to think that this clarity is what allows it to move, because salt water, dense and busy, slows down when cold. But freshwater ice, pure and light, can float, can shift, can begin its slow descent toward the sea. And when a piece breaks off, when it calves into the ocean, separating from the parent glacier, it brings with it only water. No bitterness, no sting. Just a body made of cold and memory. And maybe that's why icebergs glimmer the way they do, why they sing in the sunlight, why they crack but do not shatter, because they hold nothing but water and the time that shaped it. They do not carry the weight of what they cast aside. They do not mourn what they could not hold. They simply drift, and as they do, they melt. Quickly, not loudly, but steadily. And the water they return to the sea is softer than the sea itself. It lightens what it touches. It brings a kind of sweetness to the salt that once rejected it. You might ask, does the salt miss the water? Or, does the water miss the salt? But perhaps that's the wrong question. Perhaps there are some things meant only to pass by each other, to meet briefly and then separate, changed, but not entangled. And so the story continues, of freezing and parting, of drifting and returning. The iceberg moves not because it wants to, but because gravity does not wait. Pulls the glacier forward. It presses it toward the coast, toward the edge, toward the sound of something breaking free. And this is where we go next, because the ice, having shed its salt, having become itself, is ready for the fall. Not a fall of destruction, but of release. The moment it lets go of the land and becomes something floating, a body without salt, drifting in a sea that once couldn't hold it, now belonging to the waves it was once separate from. But before it floats, before it sings, before it melts into the brine again, it must break. You are standing on something ancient, and it is no longer still. Not all movement begins with sound. Some things shift in silence, so slowly that time forgets to count them. The glacier does not race. It does not lurch or leap. It simply leans. And that leaning, so subtle, so invisible, is how the journey begins. You feel nothing underfoot, no tremor, no slide. But beneath you, ice is inching forward. By millimeters, by memory. This is not a place of haste. This is a place where direction is more important than speed, where weight becomes a guide, not a burden. The glacier begins its long walk to the sea, a walk that takes centuries, sometimes more, but it walks because gravity is patient. And pressure, once gathered, must go somewhere. The snow that became fern, the fern that became ice, the ice that became heavy, all of it now begins to move, downhill, always downhill, but not falling, just surrendering. You might think of it like a slow breath. The glacier inhales for 10,000 years, pressing down into the earth. And now, at last, it exhales. The land beneath it groans, not in pain, but in recognition. Rock and ice speak in scratches, in grooves. Each movement leaves a mark. The glacier drags small stones at its base, and those stones become chisels. They etch into the bedrock. They sculpt valleys. You've seen these carvings before, perhaps without knowing it. The U-shaped valleys, the long ridges, the fjords, the flat, polished stones. All stories told by ice that passed through and did not ask permission. The glacier is not destructive. It is deliberate. It does not break the land. It shapes it, softens it, stretches it. Every step it takes is both weight and whisper. And still, you do not hear it, because this kind of movement does not need sound, only persistence. You might wonder, How does something so solid learn to flow? And the answer is not obvious. Because glaciers are not liquid. And yet they move. The truth is, ice deforms, not at the top where it's brittle, but deep below where pressure unlocks strange behaviors. The molecules inside the ice slide past each other like dancers pressed too closely on a crowded floor. Not melting, not breaking, just bending. This bending is called plastic flow, a movement so slow you could never see it happening. But years later, you'd find your footprints stretched thin. This is the glacier's secret. It moves not by breaking, but by yielding. It flows like glass does. Like time does. And in some places, it slides. The base of the glacier, pressed hard against the ground, melts just enough to become slippery. A thin film of meltwire forms beneath all that weight, just enough to let the ice glide forward. This is called basal sliding, and it's less like skating, more like sighing. It is not fast, but it is certain. Together, these two motions, the flow from within and the slide from below, carry the glacier forward. 1 inch at a time, then a foot, then a mile. Crosses mountains, not in defiance, but because it doesn't know how to stop. And as it moves, it gathers. Snow continues to fall. New layers pile on. More weight, more pressure, more reason to keep going. The glacier becomes not just a traveler, but a carrier. It lifts rocks, sediment, sometimes whole boulders, frozen into its base like forgotten thoughts. These hitchhikers ride along for centuries until the glacier finally lets them go, depositing them in fields and moraines far from where they began. You may have seen them, those scattered stones in empty places, left behind by something that never said goodbye. They are called glacial erratics, out-of-place boulders that seem to have wandered. But really, they were carried, like you carry stories you don't remember collecting, like you carry feelings that don't belong to this moment, but to somewhere far behind you. The glacier carries its past until it no longer needs to, until it finds the sea. But it's not there yet. There is still more land to touch, more earth to press against, more time to pass through. And still, it never hurries, because glaciers do not chase their endings. They become them. The cold does not rush. It teaches. And if you listen, you can hear the lesson, that every step forward is built on everything that came before. That momentum is memory, and movement is trust. Trust that the sea will still be there. Even if it takes 1,000 years to reach, the glacier rounds a corner. It folds around a hill. It deepens a valley. It does not speak, but it leaves behind a language written in stone. And when the sun shines, it glows, not because it wants to be seen, but because clarity cannot help but shimmer. You watch it from above, this slow river of ice. It looks like it isn't moving, but come back in a decade, and it will have passed the place you're standing. Come back in a century, and it will be gone, not vanished, just changed, melted into memory. But that's still far away. For now, it walks, slow, heavy, unstoppable. And beneath it, the land remembers. It creaks, it bends, it lets itself be redrawn. Some of the deepest lakes in the world were carved by glaciers. Some of the softest hills were smoothed by their hands. Even the soil beneath your feet may carry dust that once lay beneath ice. Nothing passes untouched. The glacier does not choose to shape the world. It simply moves, and the shaping happens. That, too, is a kind of wisdom. Not everything must be forced. Not everything must be planned. Sometimes movement alone is enough. And so, the glacier continues, southward, forward, down. The sky above it changes, but the ice does not mind. It has seen so many skies they all begin to feel the same. It waits for no one, but it welcomes everything. Avalanches, snowfall, sun. It accepts them all, adds them to its body, and keeps walking. The glacier is not one thing. It is many things, pressed into unity. A collection of storms, a memory of breath, a mountain that learned how to move. And as it nears the edge of land, the world begins to shift. The air smells of salt. The wind comes from below. And the ice, still unaware of its ending, keeps going, because that is what it does. It goes dot until suddenly the land runs out. There is no more earth to press against, only open sky, only drop dot, and then it breaks. But that is the next part of the story. The sound of letting go. The moment when stillness becomes drift. You've come to the end of something, but it doesn't feel like an ending dot. It feels like breath held just a second too long. Like something is waiting to exhale. The glacier has walked a long, slow path, down from the highlands, over rock and silence, carving, pressing, shaping. Now, it reaches the edge of the world. Land runs out. There is no more earth to hold it. Only open air. Only the sea below, waiting with arms it hasn't used in years. The ice? The ice does what it was always going to do dot. It lets go. Not all at once. Not in violence. Not in rage, but like a sigh. Like a long breath escaping after 1,000 winters. This is calving, the moment a glacier breaks. The birth of an iceberg dot, you might expect thunder, shaking, drama, but it begins with a crack, a line, a thread of tension splitting open. Not suddenly, but patiently. The glacier doesn't panic. It simply releases. The piece that falls away was never lost. It was meant to be set free. It teeters, pauses, then tips. The sound it makes is not just sound. It is memory breaking surface. A body of ice, formed in snowfall, pressed by centuries, now falling toward the sea. It never knew dot. It hits the water with a grace you wouldn't expect from something so massive. Not like stone, not like crash, more like inhale becoming exhale dot. And just like that, a new thing begins. The iceberg is born. It floats, not proudly, but quietly, like a thought set adrift, like a whisper finding its listener on the other side of the wind. You watch it bob gently. This white, blue shape that holds within it 1,000 years of snowfall. It doesn't sink. It can't, because ice, especially this kind, is less dense than the water it now rests in. That's why it floats. Not because it's empty, but because it's whole, because it carries nothing but what it needs, and most of all, because it left the salt behind. The sea around it is different, busy, thick with minerals, alive in ways the iceberg never learned, but the iceberg doesn't resist. It allows itself to be surrounded by strangeness, not to float among salt without absorbing it. That, too, is a kind of peace. You might imagine it feels afraid. To leave land, to fall, to drift. But this ice was made for drifting. It was shaped to move. Even if it didn't know it until now. And so it bobs, tilts, finds its balance, learns its rhythm. Even massive things must learn how to float. The iceberg is much larger than it looks. What you see above water, it's only a fraction, roughly 10%. The rest is hidden, pressed beneath the surface, invisible. That's how icebergs are. 90% memory, 10% expression. Like people, they carry more than they show. You may admire their stillness, their shine, their grace. But beneath, weight, structure, depth. Some icebergs are as large as cities, others small as ships. All of them waiting to melt, but not in a hurry. They drift, moved by currents, tugged by tides, guided by forces they can't control. And yet they never seem lost. They are not steering, but they are going. The sea around them welcomes them in its own way. Sometimes gentle, sometimes rough, but always inevitable, because the sea is where ice returns. It's not going home. It's becoming part of something larger. Even now, as the iceberg floats quietly, it is changing. The edges begin to soften. The corners melt. Not rapidly, but constantly. Sunlight touches its skin. Waves lap at its base. And slowly, the iceberg begins to forget its shape, but not its story. Inside, the layers still whisper. Snowfall from 100 generations ago rests in its center. Ancient air bubbles are trapped between crystals. Air that once filled lungs long gone. Air from forgotten storms. That's what this iceberg holds. Not just ice, but history. And now it drifts through the present toward its future. You watch it from a distance, and it seems peaceful, untouched, cold and calm, but it is dissolving. Every second, a little more of it returns to water. And that water, pure, unsalted, blends with the sea that once rejected it. The salt doesn't mind. It opens its arms. It mixes. It becomes. And the iceberg, in melting, fulfills its purpose. Not to remain, but to give. To return water back to the world. This is not death. This is reunion. There's something sacred in that even the coldest things eventually warm. Even the most solid learn to dissolve. You might think melting is an end, but it's just another movement. The iceberg will become rain, or fog, or waves on some other shore. And in each form, it remembers, because water does not forget. It flows, it carries. It finds the path even when none is shown. And still, the iceberg drifts. For now, it holds its shape. For now, it remembers what it once was. You wonder how long it will last. Weeks, months? The ocean decides. The sun helps. But the iceberg does not resist. It simply is floating, melting, becoming. Some pieces break off. Small chunks. Soft echoes of the calving that brought it here. They scatter like seeds. Each one a story. Each one a step closer to water. You watch, and you realize something quiet. This breaking doesn't feel like destruction. It feels like breath. Like exhale. The kind that comes after a long-held silence. The kind that says, you can let go now. And that's what the iceberg does. Not all at once, but steadily, gracefully. It lets go of form, of weight, of edge, until all that's left is water. And that water joins the sea. Not loudly, not noticeably, but truly. And somewhere far below, currents carry it, pull it deeper, farther, wider, and the journey continues. Because even though the iceberg's body melts, its motion does not stop. It becomes something new, something flowing. And one day, perhaps years from now, that same water may rise as vapor, may fall as snow, may freeze again in a land far from here. The cycle is quiet, but infinite. And you, still watching, feel a strange peace. Because even the breaking things are not broken. Even the drifting have a place to go. And as the iceberg vanishes into ocean, it does not disappear. It only changes name. And now, your thoughts drift too. Like pieces of ice floating into stillness. And in the distance, you sense something more. The ocean, beneath the surface, is beginning to move, because every drop of fresh water affects the deep. Every bit of melted ice calls something larger into motion. And that is where we go next. You see it again now. The iceberg, adrift in a sea it never expected to meet. And it floats, but just barely. Not like a balloon, not like a leaf, but like a thought too heavy to hold and too honest to sink. You watch it from afar. Its white crown gleams in the soft light, but you know, most of it is missing, not gone, just hidden. Because with icebergs, what you see is never the whole, only the surface. only the outline. Only the quiet, floating mask. Beneath the water, the real shape rests. Still, immense, almost invisible. Roughly, 90% of an iceberg's body remains beneath. The surface. 9 parts submerged. 1 part exposed. A geometry of humility. And why? Why doesn't it sink entirely? Why does it stay afloat, but only just? The answer lies in a balance older than breath. It's called buoyancy, the upward force that opposes gravity. The water pushes up as the earth pulls down. And for ice, those forces nearly match. Not exactly, but just enough. Ice is less dense than liquid water. Slightly, subtly, because when water freezes, its molecules arrange themselves in a tidy, open lattice. They space out, lock into place. They leave room for air. They grow larger, not heavier. Is rare in nature. Most solids shrink as they harden. But water expands. And that expansion makes ice float, but not proudly. Not far above the sea. Just enough to survive. Enough to drift. Enough to be seen, but never fully understood. You might feel this too, somewhere in your own bones. That sensation of carrying more than others can see. Of moving through the world with most of your weight unnoticed. The iceberg lives like this. Part ghost, part witness, floating, but grounded in depth. The ocean accepts it, not because it's light, but because it displaces its own mass. That's the principle. An object in water will float if it displaces a volume of water equal in weight to itself. So the iceberg presses into the sea, and the sea answers, you belong, but only just. You are here on permission borrowed from balance. The water lifts the ice, but only until that balance is met. No more, no less. There's something deeply human in that. We all float on equations we don't always understand. Held aloft by grace, suspended by forces we didn't invent, but still rely on. And like the iceberg, we reveal a sliver and conceal a continent. You could look at it for hours. Top glistening, the ridges, the birds resting gently, the shadows shifting with the sun, but you'll never see its shape completely. Not from above, not from here. You'd have to dive, sink, swim through the cold. You'd have to feel your way around something ancient, carved by wind, polished by tides. And even then, you'd only touch a part, because the shape changes. It melts, it rotates, it fractures. What was true yesterday may not be true today. And that, too, is part of its floating. Not just staying above water, but staying in motion. The iceberg does not command direction. It is guided. By currents, by wind, by warmth. It yields. And in yielding, it continues. And what happens if enough of it melts? If the balance tips? Then it may roll. Suddenly, without warning, the center of gravity shifts. And the iceberg flips. Something that once stood above now hides below. What was beneath now rises. These events can be violent, but they are natural. A reminder that balance is not stillness. It is a dance. Even stability has rhythm. And so the iceberg floats, not in peace, but in ongoing agreement with the sea around it. Every second, it melts. Just a little. Just enough to change the equation. And the ocean answers again, yes. Still, you still belong. Until one day, the answer is no longer yes. The mass shifts. The shape dissolves. The buoyant force wanes. And the iceberg becomes water once more. But not now. Not yet. Tonight, it still drifts. Balanced. Almost invisible. Almost too much. Like a lullaby sung beneath your pillow. Present, but just out of reach. You wonder how something so massive can stay afloat at all. And the truth is, it doesn't. Not fully. It is sinking softly every moment. Just not all at once. You felt this too, perhaps. the slow melt of emotion, the way strength dissolves quietly, not broken, just transformed. Floating things are always changing. The iceberg is no exception. It leans, it drips, it releases. Sometimes a chunk falls off, a sound like thunder across the sea. But mostly, its change is silent, because melting is not loud, that is tender. And in that tenderness, you find something profound. Floating is not weakness. It's a negotiation. Between pressure and lightness, between cold and surrender. The iceberg is not trying to last forever. It's simply trying to be. To exist between two worlds, solid and liquid, memory and motion. It is water, held together by cold. And every drop of warmth reminds it what it used to be. Not to punish it, but to bring it home. So it floats. But barely. A mirror of balance, a sculpture of science, a drifting meditation. And when you look at it, you're not just seeing ice. You're seeing physics and time and silence made visible. It floats because of space, because of distance between molecules, because of absence, because cold made room for breath to rest. And isn't that the very nature of peace? Space inside, structure, softness inside shape. That's what keeps the iceberg up. That's what keeps you going. Not the hardness, but the gentle, sacred gap. And so it floats. A little deeper now, a little softer, a little closer to forgetting its own form. But still, it floats, because things don't have to be light to stay above water. They only need to know how to rest in what holds them. And tomorrow, or the next day, or the one after that, the melting will deepen, the weight will shift, the shape will change, the drift will become released. And that is where we are going next, because floating is only the beginning of dissolving. There are kinds of change, so slow, you only notice them when they're nearly done. This is one of those. The iceberg is still floating, but it has begun to melt. Not in panic, not in pain, but like a breath let out after being held too long. You imagine melting as something sudden, a rushing, a vanishing, a quick surrender to warmth. But this melting is different. It's quiet, reverent, an offering, not a collapse. Iceberg does not fight the thaw. It allows it. Every edge softens. Every surface yields. And where there were once sharp ridges, now there are curves. And where there was once resistance, there is grace. This is not destruction. This is release. The sun overhead doesn't burn. It hums. Its light kisses the surface, and tiny droplets begin to form. Not many, just enough. A glint, a shimmer, a beginning. And the sea, salted and vast, waits below with open arms. It does not rush in. It does not tear away the ice. It simply receives what is offered. One drop at a time. This is the nature of thaw. Not fire, not force, but permission. You listen, and you can almost hear it. The sound of water, remembering how to be free. Each drip is a memory released. A moment long held, finally let go. The iceberg does not mourn its melting. It understands it. This is what it was meant for. To carry water to the sea in the slowest way possible. To drift, to soften, to surrender. You may have felt this, too. The slow thaw of something you held too long. Not because you are wrong to hold it, but because everything has. It's time. And when the time comes, the letting go feels like kindness. That's what the iceberg is doing now. Being kind to itself. Letting the saltless water within return to the world. No ceremony. No grand farewell. Just 1,000 tiny gestures of release. At first, the melting is surface deep. Just the top. Just the outer shell. But with each passing hour, the warmth sinks deeper. Tiny fractures widen. Bubbles of ancient air escape. Not loudly, just quietly, like sighs. This is ablation, the process by which ice gives up its form, not all at once, just gradually. Sunlight, wind, and water each take their turn. Each leave their marked dot, and still the iceberg floats, a little lower now, a little rounder, but still afloat. You might think it would want to resist, to hold its shape a little longer. But that's not how ice works. It knows when to yield. There is wisdom in impermanence. Even the coldest bodies understand warmth as a part of their story. And so the iceberg begins to vanish, not in fear, but in rhythm. The water it gives spreads outward, joins the sea dot, and in doing so, changes it. Even one iceberg can freshen the surface around it, dilute the salt, lower the temperature, shift the current. This soft act of surrender ripples outward. A reminder, you don't need to shout to make an impact. Even the quietest melting reshapes the world. And this melting, this release, it's not just physical. It's also memory. Because inside this ice are stories, air bubbles from before you. We're born, dust from continents far away, water that fell as snow in another age. As the iceberg thaws, these things return. They rejoin the air, the ocean, the cycle. They do not disappear. They simply come home. You watch the droplets slide down the ice's surface, and you feel something, not sadness, not loss, something quieter, something like peace. Because what's happening is not a loss of identity, but a return to origin. This ice was always water. It just forgot for a while. And now it remembers. You might think of times when you, too, forgot what you were made of, when you became something hard to survive. And how slowly, over time, you softened, how the warmth didn't hurt. It healed. This is what the iceberg is feeling now. A soft reawakening of fluidity. And as it melts, it joins a flow much greater than itself. The droplets become trickles. The trickles become ribbons. The ribbons slide off the sides and vanish into the sea. And still, no part of this feels rushed. The thaw is as graceful as the freeze. Somewhere in the middle, you realize this is balance. This is nature, inhaling and exhaling over centuries. The glacier formed. The iceberg drifted. The thaw begins, and nothing is wrong. Everything is returning. Some days, more ice falls away. Waves knock off pieces. Sunlight digs in deeper. Other days, the cold returns. And for a moment, the melting pauses. But the direction is clear. It always has been. Back to water. Back to motion. The iceberg does not resist the pause, nor does it rush the melt. It listens. To the air, to the warmth, to itself, and it knows there is time. Even in change, there is stillness. You watch, and you wonder what happens to the shape. Will it be remembered? Will the outline be preserved in the sea? No, not exactly, but that was never the point. The iceberg's gift is not permanence. It is participation that offers what it held. And in offering, becomes part of something larger. That is the quiet truth of thaw. It is not defeat. It is reunion. Even as the iceberg softens, its essence remains. In the water, in the air, in the clouds that may form from its breath. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is lost. Only changed. Only transformed. And when the last curve melts, when the final shard slips into the ocean, it will not be with a scream, but with a whisper. I am home. And still the story continues, because the water that once was ice does not stop moving. It becomes part of the sea's surface, or sinks, or travels. Maybe it joins a current. Maybe it mixes with warmth. Maybe it waits. And you are left with the quiet knowledge that even the things we let go of don't vanish. They ripple. They reshape. They remember. Which brings us to something even deeper. Because if ice can remember how to become water, can water remember what it once was? Water has no spine, no bones, no center dot, and yet it remembers, even when it melts, even when it flows, even when it disappears into cloud. Water carries something with it, something silent, something real. You've watched the iceberg thaw, its foam softening, its memory becoming motion. But the story isn't over. Not even close, because the melted water, now slipping gently into the ocean, still remembers the cold dot. It remembers pressure. It remembers stillness. It remembers falling as snow before anyone wrote stories down. How? Not through language, not through thought, but through structure, through bonds, through shape. Water is simple. Two atoms of hydrogen, one of oxygen. And that simplicity is a miracle, because each water molecule is drawn to others. It forms hydrogen bonds, tiny invisible handshakes that link one molecule to the next dot. These bonds break and form constantly, thousands of times per second. But their patterns are not random. They reflect where the water has been, how tightly it's held together, how recently it froze, how quickly it warmed. These bonds are the language of water's memory, not words, but arrangement, not sentences, but rhythm. You can't see it with your eyes, but deep inside, water knows. Some molecules are heavier. They carry isotopes, versions of hydrogen or oxygen with extra weight. And these heavier waters move differently. They fall as rain in colder places. They freeze first. They hold clues. Scientists call it the isotopic fingerprint, a trace of where the water came from, of how far it's traveled, of what temperatures it knew. So even a drop of melted iceberg can whisper its origin, not just as a place, but as a feeling. Cold, pressure, patience. Water doesn't just move. It brings stories with it. And some of those stories are ancient. There is water in your body older than the continents. Water once inside comets. Water once held in the lungs of the creatures before us. The glass you drink from tonight may hold molecules that passed through the roots of trees before the first wheel turned. Water cycles, but it does not forget. The same molecules rise as mist, then fall again as rain. They flow through rivers, then oceans, then clouds, then you. Your tears have touched stars. Your sweat has circled the globe. Your breath carries vapor older than names. This is the truth of water. It is never still, and never truly new. You cannot own it. Only borrow it for a while. And yet, it knows you. When you touch it, it reshapes to fit your skin. When you speak, near it, its molecules shift, vibrating with sound. It listens. It reflects. It flows where you lead it, but it always keeps some part of its past. Even in the warmth of your palm, water remembers cold. It has memory, not like a mind, but like a mirror. It shows you what you bring to it. And it carries forward what came before. In this way, water is the keeper of time. Not clocks, not calendars, but the physical evidence that nothing is lost, only changed. When a glacier melts, that water moves into the sea, and the ocean begins to shift. But the water remains what it was, saltless, quiet, ancient. And even when it mixes slowly. It travels in layers. It keeps to itself for a while. Fresh water floats atop the salt. It forms a skin, a memory on the surface. Eventually, it will blend. It will become part of the deep, but not right away, because memory takes time to dissolve. Even in water. Even in waves. The ocean, you see, is not one body. It is many, a stack of slow-moving layers, each one with its own temperature, its own salt, its own story. The water from your iceberg may stay near the surface for years, or sink, or loop around a current for a century. Its path is long, its rhythm slow, but it is never aimless. Each current pulls it forward, Each swirl pulls it down. Each eddy holds it close. Water remembers not by staying still, but by returning to rivers, to clouds, to cells. To you, that is the nature of this element. It forgets nothing. It only reshapes its remembering. And in this soft return, it teaches you something gentle. You don't have to hold everything tightly to carry it with you. You don't have to stay the same to honor where you've been. You only need to keep moving. And you are, aren't you? Just like the water, through days, through choices, through change. And maybe that's why you're drawn to it, why watching waves feels like watching yourself. Because water reminds you of your own flow, your own echoes, your own forgotten origins. You've been so many versions of yourself. And like water, you've adapted again and again, still carrying what matters, still releasing what doesn't fit. This melted iceberg isn't lost, it is remembered. In currents, in salt lines, in warmth, in time, and as it joins the sea, it joins the others. The rain that fed forests, the meltwater that shaped canyons, the river that carried dreams downstream, and all of it, still whispering who it was. You feel it now, that softness in your chest, the ache of recognition, because part of you is water, part of you has never forgotten the cold, the depth, the drift, the becoming, and when you sleep tonight, some part of your breath will return to the sky, and the sky will hold it until it's ready to fall again. This is not the end. It is the continuation, and next, we'll follow the journey beneath the surface. Because, while water remembers where it came from, the sea remembers how to welcome it home. The iceberg has melted. The memory has dissolved. And now, the fresh water enters the sea. It slips in quietly, like a dream rejoining the waking world. And the ocean, vast, ancient, salted by time, makes no protest that it welcomes the newcomer with the patience only the deep can offer. There is no rejection here, no border, no question. The salt water does not ask, where did you come from? Or why are you different? It simply says, you are here. You are part of us now. And so, the melted ice, once snow, once glacier, once floating and alone, becomes ocean. Not instantly, not completely, but steadily. Fresh water and salt water do not mix right away. They take their time. At first, the fresh water forms a layer. It floats above, lighter and cleaner, shimmering like glass beneath. The sun. It resists the pull downward. It holds to the surface like breath, held in a mouth, not ready to speak. But the sea knows patience. It knows that even the lightest things will one day descend. Mixing begins slowly. Molecule by molecule, fold by fold, the salt reaches up. The fresh sinks down. They swirl. They spiral. They become. This is called diffusion, the gradual blending of differences until harmony emerges. It is not hurried. It is not forced. It is simply what happens when things stay close long enough to recognize each other. And underneath it all, currents move. Massive, invisible rivers flowing within the ocean itself, pulling water across continents, over trenches, around the equator. This is the thermaline circulation, a global conveyor belt, driven by temperature and salt. Cold, salty water is dense. It sinks. Warm, fresher water is light. It rises. And so the ocean turns itself over, again and again. A great exhale that takes centuries to complete. Your melted iceberg, fresh and clean, may take years to join that current. Or it may linger at the surface, evaporating into cloud. But either way, it belongs. The ocean accepts all forms. Warm, cold, heavy, light, new, old. Even rain, falling suddenly from sky to sea, is gathered. Even rivers, rushing in with sediment. And sound, are quieted. The ocean embraces everything, not because it is indifferent, but because it understands what it means to carry. It has held comets and shipwrecks and silence. It has held every grief poured into it by human hands. It has held every joy splashed across its surface by children who don't yet know what sinking feels like. And still, it opens wide. It does not ask water to be one thing. It only asks it to keep moving. You may have felt this yourself, the longing to be accepted while still being different. To bring your whole self into something larger, without erasing the edges. The ocean knows how. It folds difference without flattening it. Fresh water becomes part of salt water, not by giving up its story, but by dissolving into something shared. You are not less because you blended. You are more because you became part of a greater rhythm. That's what the ocean teaches. Inclusion, without confusion. Unity, without sameness. And as the layers mix, as salt and fresh become swirl and wave, the story deepens. The upper ocean, where sunlight reaches, is always changing. Winds stir it. Storms churn it. Tides lift and lower it. But below, in the twilight zone, things are slower, cooler, calmer, thicker. The water that sinks with purpose. Carrying with it carbon, oxygen, memories of light. This downward motion is part of the balance, because what sinks makes room for what rises. And so the ocean breathes. Inhale, exhale. Mix, drift, embrace. There is no judgment in this motion, only rhythm. And in that rhythm, your iceberg-turned water finds its way. It may cool a coral reef, or nourish a deep-sea current, or rise as mist and rain again on a mountain far away. Whatever path it takes, the ocean makes room. That's the miracle. Here, nothing is lost. Even difference becomes contribution. Even separation becomes song. You can picture it now. The molecules moving, bumping gently into each other, forming bonds, breaking them, forming. It's not chaos. It's choreography. This is how the sea dances, slowly, with grace. And you are part of it. The water in you once swam in oceans. It once swirled in clouds. It once fell, softly, as snow. Now it listens through your skin. It echoes through your breath. It reminds you, you too, are meant to mix. To soften what you meet, to blend without erasing. Even your differences can become part of something larger. Like the sea, you can welcome what is unfamiliar without fear. You can be salt and still receive sweetness. You can be still and still allow movement. The ocean does not ask for perfection, only presence. And as the currents move, as the layers fold, the water becomes one body again, not identical, not sterile, but whole, a living memory of everything. It's held. That's why the ocean feels sacred to us. Not just because it's wide, but because it accepts. It takes in the rivers, the rain, the meltwater, the sky. And gives back clouds, waves, storms, life. Always giving, always receiving. Always balancing. And still, it changes, minute by minute, age by age. And this, too, holds a truth. To embrace everything is not to freeze. It is to flow. To mix, and be mixed. To change, and yet remain. And one day, long after your melted iceberg has disappeared from sight, its molecules will return. To land, to air, to glass, to skin. Because water always comes back. It does not vanish. It only folds itself into new forms. And the ocean, wide and wild, remembers them all, which brings us to the final movement in this story. Because if the sea receives everything, what happens next? Where do all waters go when they have nowhere left to run? And who do they become when they forget they were ever ice? It ends where it began. And yet, nothing ends at all. The water you followed, as snow, as glacier, as ice, As melt, it continues. It does not stop moving. It does not ask permission. It only becomes. This is where all water goes. Not to disappear, but to return. Return to clouds, to rain, to mist on your windows and rivers at your feet. Even the deepest drop in the ocean will rise again one day, lifted by warmth, carried by light. This is evaporation where liquid becomes sky. It doesn't happen with noise, only with patience. A single molecule gains enough energy to slip away. No goodbyes, no marks, just motion. The drop becomes vapor. The sea becomes cloud. And that vapor drifts. Higher, cooler, wider. It gathers with others. It floats on the wind. And when the time is right, when the sky grows heavy with holding, the cloud opens and water returns as rain, or snow, or soft drizzle that barely touches the ground. This is the water cycle. But you already knew that. Not in words, but in feeling. You've watched puddles vanish. You've breathed fog. You've walked through storms and never questioned where they began. Now you know. They began long before. In ancient snow, in melting ice, in driftwood rivers and patient seas. Even the water on your skin tonight. It has been here before. It may have fallen on a glacier 1,000 years ago. It may have curled inside a leaf or been swallowed by moonlight, but it never ceased, because water doesn't die. It turns, it travels, it transforms. And eventually it finds its way back to the sea, back to the sky, back to the beginning. This is not just a story of icebergs. It's a story of return. Everything comes home. Even the water inside you will one day leave through breath, through sweat, through quiet tears you didn't know you needed to shed. And it will join the world again. Not lost, just free. It will swirl through clouds. It will drop into soil. It will feed roots and carry seeds. And you will go on holding new water, new memory. Because you are part of the cycle. The same molecules flow through you that once carved canyons, once fell on pyramids, once cooled the skin of mammoths. You are not separate. You are not temporary. You are water-wearing skin. And when your skin is tired, your water will know the way. It will travel on. The rivers will carry it. The oceans will hold it. The clouds will raise it. The snow will catch it. And again, and again, and again, it will return. This is what the planet knows in its bones of stone and its breath of wind. Nothing is lost, not memory, not form, not love, only changed, only passed on, only folded into new shapes with the same old songs. The next time you drink from a glass, pause. You are tasting history. A drop that once drifted as fog through mountain air. A molecule that once rested deep in the folds of a sleeping glacier. A memory that has traveled further than you ever will, and still made its way to your lips. The next time you hear rain tapping on your window, close your eyes. You are hearing a return. The sound of something becoming itself again. The sky does not weep in sadness. It weeps in rhythm, in gratitude, in endless cycles of renewal. You are part of that. The moment you were born, the water in you recognized its path, and the moment you sleep, it softens, listens, waits for your dreaming to dissolve the day. Been traveling with it, from the stillness of snow to the swirl of the sea. You followed the iceberg through silence, through weight, through thaw, through remembering. And now you rest where all water rests, in motion, in return, in the knowing that you never had to hold on. The truth of water isn't in its shape. It's in its ability to keep becoming. To fall, to freeze, to melt, to rise. And still be whole. So tonight, let your thoughts melt. Let your memories drift. Let your breath rise like vapor on a quiet lake. You are not falling apart. You are simply cycling through a longer, Story. One that began before you. One that will continue long after. The stars above. You once stirred in oceans. The oceans around you once stirred in stars. And the water within you has always known how to return. So let it. Let yourself. Float. Melt. Become quiet. Because you now know the answer to every question this journey has asked. Where does it go? What happens to the cold? What happens to the drop? What happens when you let go? It comes home. It becomes part of something vast and kind and waiting, just like you. Nothing is ever truly lost, only softened, only remembered in a different form. Yourself rest now. Let your own story drift like water in moonlight. You're already on your way back.